If I say Christianity and the written word, what comes to mind? Well, obvious this, right? Or maybe it's this. Then there's this, The Shack by Paul Young, a novel about a grieving father who comes face to face with God. The Shack spent almost a year atop the New York Times bestseller list, more than 18 million copies in 42 languages. Legions of fans testify that the book brought them closer to their version of the Creator. And since even the Bible had a sequel, you know, new and old, Paul has written a follow-up. Crossroads tells the story of a man as he examines his life and the consequences of his actions. The twist? Well, it all takes place somewhere between heaven and earth.
We welcome back to the show, Paul Young. Hey, bud. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again, man. How are you? Everything that matters is great.
Good. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Congrats on your new book, young man.
Thank you.
Now you're at a place where you're putting out another book, and even though you can say you don't have any expectations, people do.
People do, but you can take on as much pressure as you want. You know, if you've got people around you, you can take on all their pressure if you want it. And I frankly don't want it. And so for me, it was part of the staying inside the grace of a day. You know, I don't know. I don't understand how this all works. I didn't ask for this in the first place.
Right.
So I'm really free. The first 15 copies of The Shack did everything I ever wanted that book to do. I don't know. So I really didn't feel that pressure. Other people felt it and tried to give it to me. But you know what? It's kind of a wild adventure anyway.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, I'm sure you have these moments where you think, oh, okay, this is heavy. I'm in a different venue than I was previously.
You do. But again, you can either be the child or you can begin to create imaginations that don't exist and try to spend your today's grace on it. Right?
What's the premise of this book?
Because the premise of this book.
Initial one is for your kids, to explain something to your kids. This is different.
It's much more autobiographical. This one, I'm always exploring story. I'm not an agenda writer. I'm not trying to get you from point A to point Z and Z. And thanks. It's like I was born in
Regina. He knows how to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So I like questions. I love what's the question here, and the question is, how do you take a despicable guy, Tony, Anthony Spencer in this case, and how does change happen for someone who is absolutely resistant to it? And he is despicable. You don't like him at the beginning. And so the question is, how, if God loves every single human being, which I believe, how is it possible to penetrate into some of the shells that we create? So he's a hard-driving business guy. All he cares is about the next success. He is on the road to the next one. He doesn't care about how his choices are influencing the people around him. And throughout our lives, we're always running into crossroads. We're running into those situations, and usually they involve people, because it's inside relationship where everything happens for us. And he runs into one. In this case, it's a health issue, and it puts him into a coma. And so what happens inside that space, right?
Well, then he gets the thing that most people wish they would have, which is a chance to right your wrongs in a way. And
who knows that we don't?
Okay.
Who knows that we don't get a chance to participate in the undoing of the damage that we've done?
Who's Spencer then? Who is this guy? Because when you write a book that's semi-autobiographical in a way, suddenly you're not a fiction writer. I mean, you are, but you're not, right? So who is this guy? Is he you? Is he your dad? Is he?
You know, he's a little bit of a lot of us, and my characters always have my DNA somewhere in them, usually on the dark side. And I've been through a lot of change and transformation. I know guys that have done exactly what Tony has done in terms of his relationships. Exactly, actually. And
they're super pissed that you put it in the book, right?
Oh, you know, they haven't called, you know. So you have to believe that some of them won't read it.
Right,
and, but again, you're pulling from your history, your pain, your damage, your dad's, you know, it's all built into some of this.
Damage is a good word. Damaged hearts.
Damaged hearts, damaged souls.
That's in this book.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he gets an opportunity to see his own soul, right? And to experience the damage that he has participated in creating, not alone. And the shack was the house on the inside that people help us build, right?
Right.
And so it's the place where we hide our addictions and store our secrets. And a lot of us, we didn't ask to build a house on the inside that ended up being there, but we live there. That's our own heart, our own soul. And the same in Crossroads. Now what?
The shack was pretty controversial book.
Depends on who you talk to.
People who identify themselves as Christians.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Isn't that incredibly great?
Well, I thought it was super funny because I thought not that I took pleasure in any of the controversy for you, but I thought it was really funny that it was one of the few times that I get to interview a guy who is a man of faith, who his biggest adversaries weren't atheists. Wow. It was Christians.
Welcome to Jesus' world.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you take a look at Jesus' life. Who are the biggest adversaries? They're not the guys that are down at the pub, right? Mm-hmm. It's the religious people. And so they'll say one thing to him during the day, but they'll come at night and have a little conversation.
Right.
When people are upset with some of the ideas and how it's pushing their boundaries and paradigms, they're not telling me about me. I already know about me.
Do you identify as a Christian?
Define one.
I'm asking you, how would you define like your faith?
Well, I'm a Canadian, not a Republican.
Right, yeah.
Right? So I have no trouble identifying myself if we have a conversation about what that means.
What does it mean to you?
It means that at the center of all of creation, that there is a relationship within the character of God that includes the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We were created to be included in that. We were created to be expressors of that. And so at the center of everything is other-centered, self-giving love. And God's greatest expression of it is the person of Jesus.
In your relationship with that,
yeah,
where does the Bible fit in?
The Bible becomes a story about that, a story about how God comes and begins to transform the way we think about ourselves, about each other, about the world, the cosmos.
Is it the Word of God to you?
Sure.
Okay.
But so is a good rock and roll song.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Because what kind of limitations? I had this conversation with God. I never heard God speak audibly, but I have these,
right, yeah.
So I'm at 4 o'clock in the morning in Penang, Malaysia, right? My first international invitation to come speak is at Dalat International School, where I would have gone. I grew up in the highlands of New Guinea, and I would have gone there in the 8th grade if we hadn't come back to Canada. And they didn't know anything about me. As soon as they found out I was a missionary kid, man, they just about pulled the plug on the whole thing, right? But they let me come. So I'm 4 o'clock in the morning having this conversation, and I'm thinking, why didn't you just make this clear, It is kind of, God says, you think I should have put a FAQ at the back of the book, right? I'm going, yeah, that would have been really helpful. So you think this surprised us then? We thought we'd just give them a book and they'd figure it out, Well, no.
Doesn't work that way.
No. So maybe there's a value to ambiguity, right? Because it reveals the heart. What are you going to do when you're across from someone who disagrees with you? Are you going to choose to love or are you going to choose to be right?
What I like about your version, though, and this is something that growing up in an incredibly religious background, I didn't experience this because with you, there's less certainty outwardly. Yeah. So much about questions in the Bible, they're answered. There's far more certainty, and I think that's why a lot of people who I know that's why so many people who don't subscribe to the same faith structure that Christians or Muslims do, that's why most people just completely reject it because, as Bill Maher once said, you don't know anything that we don't know, you don't have any special powers that we don't have, so you can't say you're right.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, to me, the basic questions come down to the character of God, underlying a lot of this intellectual conversation. And it's also about the unity between the head and the heart. What's going to connect both those things? Because in the West, we're all head. If you think everybody's agreeing with each other, you should go to a seminary bookstore or library. And, they're looking at the same texts, and they're all over the map, right? So who is this God, really? Is God trustworthy? And that's the journey you and I have both been on. Mm-hmm. Who can we trust? Because our trust was obliterated, violated as children.
One thing we know to be true is that one's brain chemistry has a gigantic impact on who they are and how they behave, and even what they're open to.
Absolutely.
So what do you do if someone doesn't hear what you hear, doesn't believe what you believe? Is it just that they're just being true to their chemistry?
No, because we're way bigger than that. We're way bigger than if you're just going down to nothing but chemistry, you've annihilated love, you've annihilated other-centered, self-giving love, you've annihilated forgiveness and kindness, all kinds of things that are not chemically oriented. They have no definition.
Right. So here's something from Christopher Hitchens when Hitchens was on our program, right?
Yeah.
I think they sometimes put religion and morality as you can't separate the two.
That's insulting to you and to me and actually to everyone in this room, the thought that we couldn't do the right thing if we didn't believe in a celestial dictatorship that would offer us either a horrible punishment or a divine reward. Well, that, you know, we know how to do the right thing, thanks, without being blackmailed in that way.
See, I love Hitchens and I love Dawkins. I get a lot asked about them all the time. I'm sure Hitchens has a lot better view of reality now than he did when he was on your show. And
no. Listen, I'll give you free passes, but not on that one. Because you also don't know. We don't know.
Well,
yeah.
I'm assuming that there is life after death.
Right.
Right. You're absolutely right. You know, a lot of what he is upset about are the same things that you and I have been upset about, right?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of coercive, kind of religious stuff that we grew up with. The thing that he's saying is, and he's making a faith assumption, I grew up with people who threw their elderly in the river because they no longer were productive members of society, and they ate their enemies. And so what really is it? Why is it wrong? Why? Why, when you get right down to it philosophically, is it wrong to torture little children?
Right.
You know, that's part of the question here. If it's just the survival of the fittest and we're left with flat-out materialism, we got a problem.
A lot of it is just, I think a lot of people have this faith. Some have it because it truly is a calling, and I believe that 100%. I think some have it just because they're afraid of what happens at the end.
That's true.
That this life isn't enough. See, I agree with you that I don't think the end of life is the end of life, but I'm struggling with the concept of consciousness, and I don't think life and consciousness are the same thing. That we are conscious of this, so we must assume there's more. But maybe we're getting it wrong.
You know, I was in San Diego and having a conversation with I have a friend who went on eBay and bought an atheist soul for $514. And
dude,
yeah,
that atheist has figured it out.
Well, he made a kind of a strange deal. He said that he'd go to church for an hour for every $10 somebody paid for a soul.
Right.
Now, the problem was my friend Jim, who's a pastor who bought the soul, he doesn't like church much.
Right.
So it ended up them writing a book together. Casper and Jim go to church, or Jim and Casper go to church. Well, I ended up meeting Matt Casper, right? And he's an atheist.
Yep.
Right? And his first statement to me was, I'm an unbeliever. And I said, no, you're not, right? So I said, belief is an activity, not a category, right? And I don't think you're an unbeliever. Tell me what you believe in.
Yeah.
And he thought about it for a second. He said, you know, I'll tell you this. I am now a father. I did not know I had the capacity to love like this until I was a father. And suddenly, I'll step in front of a bullet for those kids. If one of them is sick, I would change places with them, right? Where does this come from? Some chemical thing that, yeah, I mean...
Some sort of evolutionary biology, that's how you keep a species alive?
Oh, yeah, right. To me, that takes way more faith than to say, look...
No, it does not take more faith. What are you talking about? It does not take more faith.
You don't think so?
Not at all. You know, what takes faith to me is, hey, dead, 3 days later, back. By the way, born of a virgin. That, to me, we know can't happen, like, on any reasonable sense. However, I don't criticize it because I think, look, if that works for you, aces, man. Like, whatever, for me, it's Aretha Franklin, for whatever it is. Whatever gets one through the night. I don't want to apply any judgment. I don't want to be that cat.
Yeah.
But I don't think science takes some faith, but I don't think evolutionary biology takes as much faith as the fact that there's this eternal.
You know, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. And I think And
I'm not challenging, I'm just I'm exploring this. I like this idea of exploring how you navigate this version of it. Because you're one of the most reasonable believers I know.
Right? Well, thanks. And yet I'm inside a confluence of things that are, you're not going to be able to isolate these things without saying, you know what, there's way more going on here than you thought there was.
Yeah.
And there's pieces of this that are simply beyond our ability to get down into simple brain chemistry. And I was with... I'll tell you a simple story. I met a gal in Jackson, Mississippi. She flies in the helicopters in Afghanistan. She's a nurse, and she...
Did you sing Johnny and June Carter Cash Tour?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I didn't. And so she volunteered for the flights that are being shot at because she has a death wish, right? And so...
she says she has a death wish, or you think she has a death wish?
No, she says.
Okay.
And the reason was, as a child growing up, she was routinely sexually violated by her father and her uncle. And she had never dealt with it. So a lot of times, you know, you tend to go into helping kinds of things because you feel so ashamed about yourself over here that, you know. And she ran into a copy of The Shack in the military. And the section on forgiveness, right, was a confrontation. And she knew she's in a prison. Unforgiveness will put you in a prison. And so she thinks, oh, I got to do something about this. At the same time, gets a word from through email that her dad is dying. He's got 6 weeks to live. She's the nurse in the family. Come home, take care of him. Right? None of this has been exposed, nothing. And she says, well, this is my opportunity. By the time she gets there, he's in a coma, deeply in a coma. And she waits, because sometimes they come out. I've been around that, but he's going deeper. And finally, she realizes he's not coming out. So she pulls up a chair next to his bed, takes his hand, and she begins. Daddy, I want you to know I'm here to ask for both of our forgiveness. Let me tell you what you did and how it impacted my life. Here's why I've never been able to have an authentic relationship with another human being. This is why I want to die, right? And she starts going through it. She starts over and then begins to name each thing again and forgive him. For this I forgive you, for this I forgive you. And she says, Paul, here I am telling my dad this, and suddenly tears come running down his face. Not, he doesn't come out of the coma, right? And not little tears. She said, just this gusher. And he's weeping and weeping and weeping. She says, there's nobody on this planet that would be able to convince me that something significant didn't happen during those moments. Right. This kind of confluence of something more penetrates us all the time, whether it's joy or wonder or beauty or even desire, right? There is something that the way we love our children, I think, is a touch point for us. Sometimes you hear a song and something happens and you know you've touched something. There is more going on here, right? And for me, the only place that I've been able to go to say, okay, what sort of defines all this has become the person of Jesus. It's the only place I know. Here you've got, and I think it's God saying, look, I know you're lost. I'm coming to find you. You know, and I can look back in my life and I think there wasn't a time, even in all my mess and the way that I've hurt people and the way that I betrayed, which I would change in a heartbeat if I could.
I mean, you went through a lot of pretty heavy things as a kid, man.
I did, and I have every reason why I shouldn't have any faith whatsoever. Yeah. And you have great sadnesses. You know, we share similar issues with our fathers, and our fathers were mixed bags. Frankly, it took me 50 years to wipe the face of my father off the face of God. And then you get sexual abuse, 5 years old. I go to boarding school, more sexual abuse, you know. That kind of stuff rips the fabric of a child's heart to shreds.
Well, and it rewires your brain.
It does. So what hope is there? You develop all these safety mechanisms, survival skills, you take it in, you create your facade. That's the, you know, the metaphor of the shack, the house, the broken place on the inside. You hate it. You think God hates it. Yeah.
Strong women play huge roles in both your books.
Absolutely.
But I've heard you say that it's not a feminist, it's pro-women. What's the difference in your opinion between feminism and pro-woman?
You know, I just don't like political categories. I think at the core of the political issues that we're involved in, trying to solve, all of those kinds of things, is the fact that we do not treat women with the respect that they deserve. Most of our damage comes from men. I think it's pretty obvious that men are more damaged than women, generally speaking, you know. And that's not just because my damage came largely from men. I mean, how many brothels exist in the world for women? Mm-hmm. You know, you take a look at the sex trafficking industry, you take a look at how much danger our women are in because even of the marketing and the advertising system and everything that demeans them and says, you need to be what we want you to be in order to be valuable.
But in all, not in all, but certainly in the biggest religious organizations, women aren't the top. Women can't get the top job.
No. And that's because we fundamentally believe that we're superior.
Thanks so much, man. Well done.
It is so great to be with you. It is.
Well done, everybody. Thanks, brother.
Love you, man.
Crossroads. We'll be right back.